Did life from other worlds come into contact with ancient humans? Were the gods humanity worshipped actually powerful aliens from beyond the stars? Welcome to the universe of Stargate, where planets light years away can be reached with a single step. From the parasitic Goa'uld to the robotic replicators and celestial Ori, humanity has found no shortage of foes and wonders as it explores the galaxy. To understand the Stargate universe, its origins must first be explored. Several millions of years ago, in a distant galaxy, there existed a race of beings known as the Ancients. The first known evolution of humanity. Many of them would be forced to travel to the Milky Way galaxy following a conflict among their people. It was here that they would construct the Stargate network, a series of gateways capable of generating wormholes through space and time, thus allowing instantaneous transportation over vast distances. Allying with various indigenous species of the new galaxy, they would form the alliance of four great races, with the Asgard, the Nox, and the Furlings. Although the ancients of the Milky Way would be devastated by a plague that swept through their population, their technology and genetic legacy would lay the groundwork for the future. Achieving a state known as Ascension, most left our reality for a higher plane of existence, leaving behind enduring mysteries. Of course, not all species would be as benevolent. First evolving as aquatic, snake-like creatures, the Goa'uld are parasites that dominated their homeworld, after taking the native humanoid species, the Unas, as hosts. Discovering a Stargate on their planet, the Goa'uld were able to spread across the galaxy. Once a Goa'uld takes a host, their body becomes a vessel under the Goa'uld's control, with their consciousness suppressed and unable to act. Due to their genetic memory, each Goa'uld possesses the memories of its ancestors, allowing them to amass vast amounts of knowledge and reverse engineer the advanced technology of other races. They searched the void of space for more ideal hosts, finally discovering Earth around 10,000 BC. Taking the name of the Egyptian sun god, the supreme system lord, Ra, enslaved the population and distributed many of them across the galaxy. Indeed, it was the Goa'uld who built the pyramids to serve as landing pads for their motherships. These human slaves were used as hosts for the Goa'uld, warriors, and worshippers. Specifically, genetically modified individuals known as Jaffa served as the bulk of Goa'uld armies, as well as incubators of larval Goa'uld. It would not be until 3000 BC that a slave revolt would sever the Goa'uld's rule of Earth, with Earth's Stargate buried at Giza, Egypt, to prevent their return. The gate would not be discovered again until 1994, whereupon it was transported to the United States and activated. A mission was launched through the gate to the planet of Abydos that resulted in the destruction of Ra and his ship. The death of Ra would incense the other Goa'uld system lords, namely Apophis, thus necessitating the creation of the SG teams by the United States military. Based under Cheyenne Mountain in Colorado Springs, the specialized teams were tasked with missions involving excursions through the Stargate, typically searching for new technology or allies that may assist in the fight against the Goa'uld. SG-1 would be the flagship team of the Stargate Command, initially consisting of Commanding Officer Colonel Jack O'Neill, Captain Samantha Carter, an expert in various hard sciences, Daniel Jackson, an authority on linguistics and archaeology, and Teal'c, a former Jaffa warrior. Numerous other SG teams exist for various roles, such as SG-3 for heavy fire support, or SG-5 for medical assistance. General Hammond would originally oversee operations behind the front lines, although O'Neill would eventually replace him after being promoted, followed by General Hank Landry. Other additions to the team would include Jonas Quinn, an intellectual from the planet Langara, and the charming con artist Vala Maldoran. Although the Goa'uld be the primary antagonists for much of the series, not all would be the evil parasites that comprised much of the species. Originating 2,000 years before the events of the Stargate series, a Goa'uld queen named Egeria came to the realization of their insidious nature. Rejecting the practice of forced parasitism, Queen Egeria opted for voluntary symbiosis, where the host and symbiote share the body. Although the Goa'uld used a technology known as the sarcophagus to achieve immortality by rejuvenating the bodies of them and their hosts, Queen Egeria rejected its use, since it gradually corrupted the sanity and empathy of its users, leading them to become cruel and egocentric. Known as Tok'ra, literally against Ra, the movement formed a small resistance group within the Goa'uld that worked to erode the power of the System Lords, with subsequent generations of Tok'ra all descended from Queen Egeria. SG-1 would first encounter the Tok'ra while helping evacuate the planet Nasya. Here, the agent Jolinar would temporarily bond with Captain Carter while trying to escape an assassin, although would later sacrifice herself to save her new host. Notably, Samantha Carter's father, Jacob, would later merge with the Tok'ra Salmak to cure his terminal cancer. Though initially distrustful of each other, the Tok'ra proved instrumental in the fight against Goa'uld system lords such as Apophis, Cronus, Nirti, and even Anubis after he achieved partial ascension. Although they posed as gods to humanity, the race, known as the Asgard, proved to be far more benign than the Goa'uld. Taking on the appearance of the classic gray alien, they reproduce by cloning and transferring their consciousnesses into new bodies. With their superior technology, the Asgard were able to enforce the Protected Planets Treaty with the Goa'uld that prevented the parasitic race from attacking worlds under Asgard protection in the Milky Way galaxy. Their wisest individuals, such as Thor or Freyr, formed the governing body known as the High Council. Despite their analytical nature, however, the advanced race suffered from genetic degradation stemming from their cloning process, and would eventually succumb to a disease as a result of their genetic manipulation. Facing extinction, the remaining Asgard gathered on their homeworld of Orilla and detonated a massive explosion that destroyed both them and the planet in order to prevent their technology from falling into enemy hands, although not before gifting their vast scientific knowledge to the Stargate team. The energy shields, weaponry, and teleportation technology of the Asgard may have made them able to stand up to the Goa'uld, but another enemy would prove to be a far deadlier threat. It was an advanced human civilization of the Ida galaxy that first created the childlike android named Reese. Feeling lonely, Reese created toys to keep her company and protect her, eventually programming them to replicate at all costs once her creators tried to destroy them. Taking the command literally, the insectoid robots consumed and processed their civilization as their numbers grew exponentially. It would be this ability to rapidly expand that would give the machines their name, the Replicators. Consisting of elementary blocks held together by Chiron energy fields, Replicators can rapidly assimilate technology and communicate via a collective consciousness that allows them to quickly adapt to threats. In their single-minded pursuit to harvest raw materials, they are often drawn to advanced technology and high energy signatures. As the Asgard engaged the spreading menace of the Replicators, they found they were resistant to directed energy weapons, although the projectile weapons used by their human allies proved to be effective at fragmenting them. More advanced human form replicators, HFRs, would later exist with the ability to meld with human minds to extract information, as well as being nearly impervious to conventional weapons, although they were made from the rare neutronium material, and thus only had limited numbers. The Replicators would finally be exterminated from the Milky Way galaxy when Samantha and Salmac used an ancient terraforming device found on Tok'ra as a superweapon to disintegrate them in an energy wave. Another of the previously mentioned 4 great races, the Nox would serve SG-1 as a more subtle ally. Appearing to be a primitive race of ethereal humanoids, they live close to nature, with settlements often integrated seamlessly into the landscape. A patient, long-lived people, the Nox revere life and practice a strict code of pacifism. This is largely a deception, in fact, as they are an extremely advanced race that utilize cloaking technology to conceal their cities, even those that float in the sky. The Nox also have the medical knowledge necessary to raise the recently deceased from death. Although they adhere to the belief that it is wrong to interfere directly with younger races, a sentiment shared by the Ancients and the Asgard, the Nox will preserve life whenever possible without altering the course of a civilization's development. Not completely defenseless, their territory on the planet Gaia is often defended by creatures known as Fenri. The Stargate Program confronted many challenges on other worlds, but also encountered intrigue and opposition on Earth. For a time, the United States monopolized the Stargate system after the discovery in Giza. However, their primary gate would be lost when the Asgard ship, the Belsenor, crashed into the Pacific following an attack by the Replicators. Alerted to the incident, the Russian Navy would recover the gate and, with a dial-home device, DHD, the Soviets had earlier recovered from the Germans, begin their own Stargate program. To make matters worse, the Beta Gate that SG-1 had previously found in Antarctica was destroyed by Anubis, leaving the Russians in control of Earth's only Stargate. At great cost, the Alpha Gate was leased from the Russians and brought back to the Cheyenne Mountain facility. Perhaps even more insidious than the plots of foreign governments were those of the National Institute of Defense, or NID. A shadowy civilian organization, the NID sought to undermine the SGC's efforts, viewing them as overly cautious and ineffective. Ruled by a largely faceless collective of politicians and businessmen known as the Committee, their methods proved to be illegal and reckless, including assassinations, blackmail, sabotage, as well as off-world mining and technological acquisition. Early on, it was Colonel Harry Mayborn that acted as the NID's bureaucratic antagonist against SG-1 and the SGC. A charismatic and self-serving individual, Mayborn would eventually be replaced by the cold and calculating Colonel Frank Simmons, once he was arrested following a purge of rogue elements from the NID. Undeterred, those responsible for the NID's actions would resurface as the Trust, to carry on their mission of recovering alien technology and amassing power. Their overreach would prove to have consequences, however, when some of their operatives were captured by the Goa'uld and implanted with symbiotes under the command of Baal, hatching a plot that resulted in the hijacking of the prototype Earth vessel, the Prometheus. Simmons would be jettisoned out of an airlock by Colonel O'Neill, ending one of the Trust's most concentrated efforts against the SGC. In return for assisting SG-1, Mayborn would be exiled to a primitive planet, where he became a de facto ruler. With the Stargate connected to such a vast galaxy, it stands to reason that other alien threats would arise. In the episode Foothold, a mysterious alien race infiltrated the SGC, able to mimic the appearance of personnel. Commonly known as the Stragoth, their true form was that of a bipedal creature with a reddish exoskeleton and mandibles, seemingly able to communicate via rapid telepathic data exchange. Their motives unknown, a method was found to disrupt their cloaking technology and thwart their invasion, leading them to detonate a device in the gate room to prevent their capture. Yet another species relying on invisibility as their chief method of attack was the Ritu, specifically a renegade faction of the civilization that sought to eliminate other races that could potentially serve the Goa'uld as hosts, waging their own war of attrition. The Ritu themselves resembled large insectoids, their ability to camouflage themselves from sight a result of the fact that they exist 180 degrees out of phase with normal space-time. Fortunately, the Tok'ra had access to a transphase eradication rods, allowing the SGC to deploy the technology around facility and nullify the rebels' invisibility. While not overtly hostile, other enemies of mankind may first appear as allies. First encountered on planet P4C 970, the Aschen have a human appearance, although tend to be stoic in their behavior. With their advanced technology, they were quick to befriend humanity, advancing Earth's medical capability with anti-aging treatments, gene therapy, and vaccinations. Decades would pass before the members of SG-1 eventually uncovered their insidious agenda. The treatments provided by the Aschen had reduced human fertility by 90%, leaving Earth's population on the brink of extinction. Utilizing the Stargate's wormhole physics to send a message back in time, the members of SG-1 sacrificed themselves to give a warning to the past and alter the timeline, written simply as, "Under no circumstances go to P4C 970, thus allowing the past team to avoid the same fate. Of all the foes faced by SG-1, however, there was one that stood above the rest. Before the Ancients arrived in the Milky Way galaxy, their people had split into two factions, with one side known as the Asurans that believed in free will and would go on to construct the Stargate network before ascending. The other faction came to be known as the Ori, that sought to gain mystical power by being worshipped as gods by non-ascended beings. Their arrival in the Milky Way galaxy filled the power vacuum left behind by the defeat of the Goa'uld system lords, with their highly advanced technology and supernatural powers more than a match for the Tok'ra, Asgard, and newly freed Jaffa. The followers of the Ori practice the religion known as Origin, and seek to convert or destroy planets in their name, claiming to offer enlightenment to those that are willing to convert. In this aim, they have a vast army of fanatical warriors armed with staff weapons similar to the ones used by Jaffa, as well as priests they have bestowed with powers. Known as priors, they have the ability to summon plagues, manipulate energy, convert followers, and telekinetically move objects. This conversion comes at a cost to their bodies, however, as priors appear pale and emaciated. Above all, it would be Valda's daughter, Adria, that was destined to become the Orisi, since she had been infused with the Ori's power while still in the womb. As the Orisi, she was to be their supreme leader in the mortal realm, and rapidly aged into adulthood after being born. In a desperate bid to combat the ascended beings, SG-1 had to track down an ancient superweapon known as the Sangral, that had the power to neutralize the status of ascended beings, rendering them mortal. It had been created by none other than Merlin of Arthurian myth, who was, in fact, an ancient that had de-ascended. With the Ori weakened, the team wielded an artifact known as the Ark of Truth that was able to reveal that the Ori were not gods to the priors, and thus halt the power the Ori received from their worship. Oma de Sala, an ascended ancient, now battles Adria, who had become fully ascended Ori on their plane of reality. It was during the struggle against Anubis that the Stargate series would begin its adventures outside the galaxy. Discovering an ancient outpost in Antarctica, the SG-1 team was not only able to use its technology to fight off a Goa'uld invasion, but also uncovered a new Stargate address. Typically, 7 chevrons are needed for a DHD to generate a Stargate wormhole. However, Daniel Jackson found an 8 chevron address that connected to a Stargate on a planet in the Pegasus galaxy. They had at last found the lost city of Atlantis. A multinational team was formed to journey to the new galaxy, its core members being civilian leader Elizabeth Weir, Major John Shepard, their military commander, Dr. Rodney McKay, Chief Science Officer, Scientist Dr. Radek Zelenka, Lieutenant Aidan Ford, Second in Command, and Dr. Carson Beckett, Chief Medical Officer. Once in the Pegasus galaxy, they would later be joined by Tayla Emigan, a skilled tracker from the Athosian people, and Ronan Dex, a soldier from the planet Ceteda. Even in this far-flung area of space, however, evil still found a place to thrive. The new Stargate team would not be in Atlantis long before encountering the Wraith, a terrifying race of humanoids evolved from Iratus insects. Through the use of a feeding orifice, they are capable of draining a victim's life force by placing their hands on their prey's chest. This both sustains them and allows the Wraith to recover from injury. Telepathic, they can communicate to each other as well as read the minds of their victims. Their society is structured as a hive, with Wraith queens spawning offspring, while lesser warriors, drones, and scientists fill specific roles. Living for thousands of years, the Wraith will enter periods of hibernation when food becomes scarce. Their technology is biomechanical in nature, grotesque by most standards and often designed for capturing targets alive in the aim of harvesting their life force later. The original ancients that built Atlantis, the Lanteans, waged a prolonged war against the Wraith, but were forced to abandon and sink the city after they were overwhelmed by the Wraith's sheer numbers. It is important to note that the Wraith, unlike the Goa'uld, do not desire worship and merely view humans as livestock to be harvested. Like the Goa'uld, however, the Wraith are not above infighting over resources or power rivalries. As on Earth, not all threats would come from alien species. At first appearing to be a pre-industrial human civilization, the Genii turned out to be a technologically modern and militaristic society. Taking refuge in vast underground bunkers, the Genii had strived to survive attacks from the Wraith for generations. With a nuclear weapons program underway, they were desperate for any way they could defend themselves against the hostile aliens, and after witnessing the capabilities of the Atlantis team, made it their mission to acquire the powerful ancient technology. Acastus Koldia, a military commander of the Genii, would become fixated on infiltrating and conquering Atlantis, branding the Stargate team from Earth as terrorists. At different points, they would be forced to ally with Atlantis against the Wraith, but were not immune from internal conflict. Unrelated to their counterparts in the Ida and Milky Way galaxies, though sharing their nanite construction, human-form replicators, known as Asurans, would come into conflict with the new denizens of Atlantis. Rather than originally created as toys, the Asurans were built by the ancients to serve as a weapon against the Wraith. Like other replicators, they had the ability to rapidly reproduce and recover from damage, as well as interface mentally. Rather than mindless reproduction, they had been programmed to destroy the alien enemy, a goal they pursued after trying to achieve ascension. Viewing Atlantis as a threat, the Stargate team was forced to ally with Wraith factions in order to survive. The Asurans would finally be vanquished in an attack that forced their core programming to relentlessly attack Wraith ships. Although the Asgard first encountered by SG-1 proved to be an invaluable ally to Earth, the same could not be said about the Vanir of the Pegasus galaxy. Essentially a rogue faction of Asgard, the Vanir first arrived in the area during the conflict between the Wraith and the Ancients. Dissatisfied with the restrictions placed on their research into genetic degradation, they broke away from the rest of the Asgard to experiment on sentient species. Not tolerating the presence of other technologically advanced species, the Wraith destroyed the Vanir ships, forced them to seek shelter in a remote outpost on a highly toxic planet. Detecting the Atera device, a superweapon capable of destroying Wraith ships entering hyperspace on Atlantis, the Vanir assaulted the city in an attempt to capture it, only to retreat once it was neutralized. Stargate Atlantis would face many more challenges, such as bureaucratic antagonists, alternate realities, and the human-Wraith hybrid named Michael. The series would climax when a Wraith superhive discovered Earth's location and planned an attack. Taking the city itself back to the Milky Way galaxy, the humans fought a pitched battle against the Wraith over Earth, with the team successfully detonating a nuclear weapon inside the superhive. The battle was won, leaving the cloaked Atlantis to land in the Pacific Ocean near San Francisco. The saga would continue in Stargate Universe, following the exploits of a stranded crew aboard an ancient vessel named Destiny. Indeed, the Stargate franchise has captured a devoted fanbase over the years eager for more stories. After all, in a galaxy where new worlds are just a step away, anything is possible.
Hi, I'm Katya and you're watching Excalibur Forge's channel for gaming, readings, and more. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Follow up on YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, and Facebook.